My name is Jeff Rhodes. I am the director of fun for a company called Ridgeline Experiences, and I am super excited to be here today talking with my buddy Vital.
I'm excited to have you here, Jeff. There's so much we can unpack, ranging from your entrepreneurship, your crazy lifestyle. I read on your bio that in 2019, since you moved to Bend, you've only slept outside. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the importance of nature for you, work-life balance, family. Here's my question though. I've known you quite a long time. You're this sort of highly creative individual, but I also see the very focused, structured businessman. You balance both. Do you fall under the category of neurodivergent? Are you ADHD? Are you ADD? If not, I know a guy who's going to diagnose you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've ever formally been diagnosed, but oh, absolutely. Like, I can't, like, it's hard to do one project. I have to do three projects at the same time. Like, and I think that's where I'm either the timeline's really tight or I've got to do multiple things in a day. Like, that's why I'm doing this yard project right now, this shed, because I can work with my hands. Then I can come in here and get escape. I got to make a film maybe today, or I had to make a PowerPoint presentation. So I can escape being creative in one world to jump into being creative in another world. But I can think about the other project while I'm doing another project, or it gives
Ah.
me a nice escape to get away. And
So
then I
for the,
add in like getting away, like doing something physical exercise. So
so
I'm
for the
trying to.
most part, though, throughout life, has that been a challenge, or have you just simply embraced this is who I am, this is how I function, and watch me optimize it and turn this into some kind of magic?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's been useful. It's been useful to have this skill set to be able to do multiple things and go different ways. But I think it's also frustrating for a lot of people. I mean, I think for working at R&D events, I would change everything all the time. Now I would keep structure for the team, but I was constantly changing things, like adding new ideas or adding new whatever it was. And I think that kind of frustrated a lot of people because it was like, can we just
Uh,
we just learned this? Why are we doing something new? I'm like, this is better. Why would we sit and do what we did yesterday? Like, we want to be
yeah.
better today than we were yesterday. That's kind of the way I go. But um, yeah,
So for those of you who are listening, I want to put the question out there. What is your challenge as a neurodivergent? What's your biggest challenge? And then how have you been able to turn it into a superpower? If so, let us know about it. How do you manage your neurodivergency, being highly creative, just being different in society? As you were saying, Jeff, you work with some colleagues, and for them, it's a challenge. You mentioned the name R&D. I know R&D. Your background is you actually started your journey working with the Ritz-Carlton. So you've
yep,
got this solid foundation. Then you started your company in 2009.
yeah. Right
So how
after
do you
the
how do you
economy takes.
focus? How do you
Great.
focus as a creative and sit down and create a company that delivers these high value team building experiences? How does that work? How did that work?
Whew, that is a good question. Well, it was good because I did have a business partner, and I think that when two people come together that are like minded, that have got the same ambition, it worked a lot better because I could push off somebody else, and I knew that, hey, listen, if I could let my guard down a little bit, he would help pick up the slack in a different area, or I could do something together. I'm finding it now, even though R&D event still exists, I find it much harder now doing it by myself because somebody played the role of sales, somebody played the role of operations, so I could be very creative in that space when I started that company. Um, and JP could be more structured, if you will. So
Yeah.
like
So you
he
found the
was my
balance.
business partner. Yeah. So we had a balance that worked out very well there.
And
But yeah,
then
I
I
think like
believe
anything, like everybody's got weaknesses, and I think my weaknesses are more exposed now that I'm on my own. And I'm
what
like,
are,
oh,
what are
not doing
what
that.
are your weaknesses? You're very aware of them. So
Yeah, I mean, I think the ability to follow up consistently or sell myself. Like I'm somebody that likes to just work really hard, and I think the work, like will showcase itself, and then that'll more business will come from that. But if you're not constantly managing relationships, following up with people, finding out what the problems are in their space, so that you can help them out of the thing, they're going to stop calling, or they're going to think you don't care about them anymore. And I think that's where I've suffered because I took so much time off. I worked for one specific client for the last few years, and I lost contact with a lot of people. And now they're like, "Now you want to talk to me?" And it's like, I do want to talk to you, and I'm sorry I didn't get back to you, or I haven't reached out in the years, but I don't know. That's just
now
something that's what I've struggled with now.
I know you as a very deep thinker. You're very philosophical. You're also the director of fun. So you've
Yeah.
got this depth. You've got this fun. I've seen your zany antics on stage. Again, going back to that level of creative genius, it looks like you're all over the place, but then by the end of the event, I'm like, wow, I don't know how he did that, but it all came together and it fit perfectly. So again, going back to, you mentioned relationships. You're a multidimensional thinker. You've got to fit into this corporate system, right? America, very corporate, very structured, very rigid, but yet you want to be authentically you. How have you navigated your uniqueness and still developed meaningful professional relationships while maintaining the integrity of your free spirit?
I think it goes back to, probably my core. I won't lie, cheat, steal, or quit. Those are like my core elements to who I am. And I think if you can live by those four standards, that means I'm not going to turn my back on somebody. I'm going to support them. I'm not going to try to steal business from somebody else. I think if you can hold yourself to a good, strong foundational core, you build on that. I think you mentioned the Ritz-Carlton earlier, where I learned service. When I talk about my foundational, level of understanding of business and operations and sales, like service was such an important thing. I think a lot of people miss that as an earlier foundational piece. And so I've been able to build on, hey, I'm going to give you great customer service. And that means I'm going to follow up with you. I'm not going to let you down. As soon as I promise something, I won't give up on, no matter even if I'm not going to make a lot of money on it. I'm still going to keep it because I promised you I was going to do that. And I think if you can do that, and you could be a trustworthy person who is always going to show up, that's got, you've got a good foundation, people are going to call you back. People will work with you and they'll want to work with you at the same time.
Are these core values that you learned getting older into the entrepreneurship, or were they established in your childhood, I guess? Is it something your parents gifted you, or is it something that came innately from you?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it came from a foundation on religion. And then I was also, although I don't really admit it, I was a Boy Scout. And there was a code. Yeah, there was a code that you had to follow. I was actually an Eagle Scout. I got out of Boy Scouts so fast. I was one of the youngest Eagle Scouts in Georgia state history, because I was like, I got to get out of this thing. And my dad wouldn't let me quit. So that was one of the core foundational principles to me, was you can't quit. You can't.
Lord Baden-Powell. I think he was the founder of the Boy Scouts, at least in England. Yeah, Lord.
Yeah, no, he was. Yeah. I think they brought that over to the States.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was good. I mean, it was a good foundational for like there was, the Boy Scouts had its own, they had their own like credo, motto, what you believed in. It was the same thing at the Ritz-Carlton too. It had a credo, had a motto. And I think a lot of that is, if I took from those elements of things that I really liked, and then I added them to my life. And I said, those were good foundational purposes. Those are things that I want to stand by. And I think it gets harder, it's like you can't lie, cheat, steal, or quit. Like those are hard, you want to lie, there are some things you want to like push your way around. I can just take this from the store. No one will notice. Whatever it is, these little things. I'll have an extra couple of washers when I'm at the bin, whatever. It's if you start to let those little tiny things go, like, oh, no one will care about this stuff, it slowly starts to build up in your life. So if you can hold that line early on little tiny things, by the time you get to make a big decision, it's like, well, these are the things I can't compromise on. So I think
I like that. Were your parents supportive of your uniqueness, your character? Did they try to mold you? Did they groom you? Did they just let you be you? Did they love you for who you were? Were you an abused child? Did you have a golden childhood? What was that like for you?
Yeah. Dude, I was super ambitious. And so I know my parents talk about that a lot. They were like, we didn't really have to give you much. Like as soon as I picked up what I wanted to do, like there was like I was a ship that without a rudder. I mean, I was straight on as narrow, man. Like I think my parents built that foundation, and then they, I grew up in a very Christian household where you prayed and we all ate together at dinner every night. I think there's value in that, right? Like,
yes,
having that formal structure with 2-parent household. My mom didn't work. My dad was an entrepreneur later in his life, and I think
so that's where the entrepreneurial seed, maybe.
Yeah.
From example, you saw that, but they were
like he left corporate America, I think, just before I was in high school, and really kind of branched off on his own. And he basically bought out the company that he was working for. It was like it was an arm of company. Anyways, but yeah, like I saw him run his own business. I saw him struggle, try to make ends meet, but enjoying the process more than anything else,
Yeah.
For me and for him, it has never been about money. It was more like, hey, how do I use the talents or my skills, it's just a better society.
So I want to go deeper into that, because there's a Sigmund Freud principle, the pleasure pain principle. We either run away from pain or we run towards pleasure. Then we have Simon Sinek, Start with Why. What's your reason for
Yeah, yeah.
doing? So you've got these very solid core Christian values. You're an entrepreneur, but you just said you don't do it for the money. So what has been, I know you kind of just tapped on it. What's the ultimate drive? What makes Jeff get out of bed in the morning and want to excel and be great? Because it's your choice.
Yeah. Like I can't pin it to one specific thing, but like my driving focus or my mantra or the thing that's on my board is I want to be better today than I was yesterday. I think that's what drives me to get out of bed to come and do something. Plus, I look at life as an adventure more so than it is, you work until this age and you retire and then you do the things you love. I'm like, I want to do something I enjoy every single day. And some days you've got to get up and I got to balance the books, things I don't really care about. I got to try to find a new piece of business. I got to, try to do, maybe there's things that I don't love to do. But if you don't do it, like future me is going to really pay for the decisions that current me makes. So,
Oh, I love that you said that. Future you is going to pay. There's always a price to pay, isn't it?
always a price to pay. So I think I wake up going, okay, what if I don't do anything, if I waste the time that I had today, what is tomorrow going to look like? And so, like I think my family hates it. I'm always doing something, you know. I use every minute of the day. I get up at 6:30 and I go to bed at midnight, and I use every single minute of the day or at least as much as I can. I don't find myself scrolling and getting lost on feeds. It's just there's too many things to do, I think, or I could go have fun, or I mean, I live in a great town where I can do any outdoor adventure I want. So if I'm sitting in my office doing nothing, I'm wasting my time. I think that's what drives me.
I
Tomorrow,
agree. You like to be productive. You mentioned you like having fun, and I want to tap into this thing that I know about you, but I also read on the website is that in 2019, I think it was when you moved to Bend, you made a decision to sleep outside. I know you're an adventurer. I know that nature. So it's two-part question. I know that nature is really important to you. You're kind of like the Bend version of Bear Grylls or Bear Grylls, the English paracommando who has a TV show and he goes out into the wilderness and survives. There's kind of an element of that for you. But what's the psychosis? Why would you commit to sleeping outside?
I think number one is I live in an amazing town with really good air quality. So there's that. Like, and I live in a peaceful town. It's not very loud. There's not a lot of construction. It's like when I lived in Las Vegas for 16 years, I didn't sleep outside because it was either too hot or it was really windy, dusty, whatever it was. The air quality wasn't so great, so it wasn't a great idea. But when I would come up to Bend in the summertime, I would find myself sleeping outside because it was cooler because it was hot inside the house. You didn't change the air, anyways. So that was kind of a forcing piece. But really, what it was that I slept better outside. Like when I would go camping or hiking, my favorite part was sleeping outside. And I was like, well, why don't I just take what I love the most and add it to my normal life? Which is a little weird because I am literally sleeping in my backyard, and my neighbors who have a 2-story house can look down and see me, sleeping in my sleeping bag. But they've gotten used to it now, and whatever. but I believe wholeheartedly in sleep. Like it's one of the 8 pillars of what I think is important in life. And if you don't get the right amount of sleep for you, you're going to pay for it the next day. And it's just going to, and I did this week, I had to do an all-nighter PowerPoint presentation because the client needed in like 24 hours. So I had to work 24 hours. And without that sleep that next day, I was a disaster. And I knew that was because I just missed that sleep cycle. My circadian rhythm was way off. And that's another thing about sleeping outside too, is that like you move at the pace of life outside.
Yes.
So the sun is waking up at 5:30, which means I now have to get up at 5:30, which means I usually go to bed at midnight, sometimes 1 a.m. because I'm working on something late. I can't do that anymore because tomorrow's going to come real quick. So I'm always planning for tomorrow today in my life, because if I don't, like the sun's going to come up at 5:30 no matter I want to or not.
That's right.
What am I going to do? Sleep on the sofa? Like, and then the kids get up, they go to school and they knock me over. So
you're this highly creative guy, highly energetic. How do you shut off? Because I know you. Your brain is racing at 100 miles an hour. I'm highly creative. I can't shut off like you do. Maybe I should start sleeping outside. Maybe that's where I'm going wrong. But how do you shut off? Do you have a routine? Is it just you just fall asleep? What do you do to optimize this situation?
Yeah. I mean, each day is a different routine depending on what the project is. And again, not to keep coming back to this point, but I plan for tomorrow today. So tomorrow is Friday. Usually no one's getting any work done in the office, which means I can get up early. I'd go for a long paddleboard. And that's probably what I'll do. I'll go to bed at like 10:30 at night, get up at 5:30, and then go for a 2 or 3 hour paddleboard before everybody gets up in the morning. Then I'll go into the office, get a few things done. I'm sorry, I moved completely off your question. I was just thinking.
No, you didn't. You were
strategy and
explaining
rhythm.
that. Yeah,
But I was just thinking, like, each day. Yeah, oh, sorry. How do I shut down at the end of that?
Sleep? How do you shut off and then like just that your brain slows down, that you fall asleep? Because I'm a creative. I struggle sleeping because the minute my head hits the pillow, my imagination goes into overdrive, and it can be imagination in terms of entrepreneurial ideas, artistic ideas, worry, concern, you name it. My brain, so that's why I'm asking, what do you do to just
it's a good question. There are two things I do. One will be funny. One will not be somebody. One is before I go to bed, I write down a list of everything I'm going to do the next day, right? Because I'm planning for tomorrow today so that I'm not laying in my bed freaking out about the things I need to do tomorrow because I don't know what I got to do tomorrow. So I already know what I'm going to do tomorrow before I go to bed. So that really helps. But then I smoke a ton of weed. So that does also help get through, some of those higher points of the day where I can kind of like, bump, like some of those bumps in the road kind of get smoothed out through that process. But usually by the time you get to like, like dinner time or something like that, like I don't need to keep going at the pace I had been going all day. So
I want to talk more about your need for nature. I also want to talk about family. Can you share with us? I love nature. I don't get enough of it. I've seen you commit to going out into nature. You've had some near-death experiences, right? While on some adventures. Couple of things. What does nature bring to you intellectually? What does it bring to your soul? What does it bring to your entrepreneurship? Why do you keep going back? What compels you?
Yeah, I think think about my Vegas lifestyle because I have so many different phases of life. I think more work dictates a lot of how much pressure I put myself under. But the way I always looked at it was like, I need to reset either my mindset, my body, whatever it needed to be. And I think most people go to the gym, right? Like they go to exercise. I'm going to go in a gym. I'm going to go to this box. I'm going to go stand on a treadmill or whatever. And don't get me wrong. I think there's value in doing that. But for me, I reset by going outside, completely cut off from any technology. So I leave my phone either, like in Vegas, I just could walk out my back door and climb a mountain, which
yes.
And I think there was so much value in sweating and taking all that stress out. I think my mind opened up a whole lot more as soon as I got outside. I was no longer I'm in a 10 by 10 room right now. It's not a very big space. So when you get outside, your mind can go and can wander. And I think that you get yourself reconnected to the rhythm of the real world. Like we get ourselves caught up in this rat race all day. You're like, I gotta get this office, I gotta get this email out, this person's calling back, I gotta get this proposal, there's so much stress, the kids, I gotta take it to work, whatever it is. You go outside, there's no need. Like it's core. You're back to your core senses. You trip, you fall off a cliff, you're gonna die. Like those kind of things are what we need. Those are the healthy stresses we need in our life. Not did I get back to this person in time before whatever those ridiculous stresses that bogged me down all day, I can let that all go when I get outside.
I love that.
And it usually takes about 2 hours of just like, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath. And I think that's where paddling and being on the water really helps move faster because you can really reset your rhythm if you just get on a river and float or something like that for an hour.
Every time we have conversations, you inspire me to remind myself, be more intentional about getting out into nature for the very reasons you mentioned. Near-death,
and it's not like, hey, I need to go climb this mountain. I need to hike 10 miles in the next hour. Like it's not about challenge. I mean, there's an element I like to be challenge, but like I like it's just free. It's free time to do whatever you want. You're outside, we're doing some exercise for sure, definitely pushing myself, but there's no agenda. It's like just reset. That's really the whole point of that.
There's no agenda. That's it. You're just sort of in the moment, going with the flow of nature, going with your own flow, your own spirit, whatever happens. I love that. Near-death experiences. I know you've had a couple. Why do you push? I want you to share, if you will, one of those near-death experiences. Why do you push those limits?
For me, I really like risk. I really like stress. And so I think living in a space where I'm kind of on the edge at all times. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. Like it's very scary, very stressful all the time. So I love it. But I think I like to challenge myself too. And I think if I can push myself to, like, I'm not going with anybody a lot of times. Usually, if you go with somebody, you want to go with somebody that's better than you. They can help bring your game up, or somebody's got more experience. You can learn from them. But there's not a lot of people that want to whitewater stand up paddleboard, or, go on a 20-mile hike, or, like, there's very few people that I know in my life that'll do that. So you get stuck doing it a lot by yourself.
Which is
And I think if
dangerous
you're
unto itself.
yeah, which is
Right.
dangerous unto itself. Yeah, I think what's funny is, like, now after 30 years of going solo, it's more difficult for me to take somebody with me, because my mindset changes if, like, I have to shepherd this person through this, or I'm more concerned about them than I am me. So I take my mind off of what it is that I should be focusing on, especially in, like, whitewater stand-up paddling. Like, you have to be laser focused on what you're doing. If you make a mistake there, things go wrong really quickly. So if I'm thinking about the person behind me or in front of me,
Yeah.
I'm not focusing on the river, which is the most important part. And I think that's where I get myself in more trouble.
So I understand risk. I understand staring danger in the face. My Cirque du Soleil background for 5 years. You do it every day. You're subconsciously, the risk, but front of mind, you're not thinking about this. At Cirque du Soleil, there's a very intense balance between risk and reckless, right? You push yourself, you try new stuff that is highly dangerous, but it's in a controlled environment. You're out there facing Mother Nature. How do you gauge? Where do you draw the line for yourself? You're a father, you've got kids, you're a husband. Do you intellectually draw this line of, okay, this is going to feel awesome, dude. Let me take this risk, but I've got responsibility. So, how do you define risk and reckless?
Oof. I mean, I think everybody that walks past me on the trail, because I'll carry my board up the trail. It's called portaging. So you have to pick the paddleboard up. And the example is whitewater stand-up paddling. I think is my new favorite activity for the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, exposes myself to a lot more risk than most people think they would do. Because I think when they think of paddleboarding, they think of, like, calm, sunny days out on the lake. I'm just gonna riding on my knees. But the psychopath is riding down this whitewater river. Like, what are you doing? So I get a lot of people on the trail that ask me, "Are you really going to go down in that?" And I think for them, it's too much risk.
Yeah.
And I think it's not like I jumped into it and I went right to, like, class 4, class 5 rapids, like, on a paddleboard. It was, you start small incrementally, you build that skill set. And I'm assuming it's very similar to, like, Cirque du Soleil. You learn this trick, and then this trick opens the door to learn this next trick, which then opens the door. And then you become very comfortable and you build this foundation of, like, I've got the skill set. I understand the equipment. I understand where I need to be.
Yes.
I've been in enough situations where I can up my game. But there is a limit where I'm not willing to go, because I do have too much responsibility. It doesn't matter. Like, I mean, I think earlier on when I was doing some dumber things, like in Vegas, I would do a lot of free climbing. Or I would free scrambling more so than, like, I wasn't like Alex Honnold, but I was climbing without a rope in, like, if you fell, you would die kind of situation.
Is that guy you just mentioned, is that the guy who climbed El Capitan without the what the documentary?
Free solo, yeah, free solo. Yeah. And so I'm not going to put myself anywhere in his category, but he's living within his means. I never saw what he was doing as reckless. I saw what he was doing as at the peak of his abilities. And I think I would love to be able to push myself to see what I could do.
Yeah.
But his situation and my situation are much different. Like, I have 3 kids, and a wife,
right.
and at one point in time I had an entire team with 12 people on it that I was responsible for. So, you have to take a step back. I mean, we could die in a car accident, or I get hit by a car as I'm going for a walk at night. Like, anything can happen. So I just think I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm not comfortable, or I'm not in the right frame of mind to do this activity, because the consequences of it are potentially death. But I would much rather live on the edge like that every single day than wrapped in bubble.
Yeah, it makes you feel. It makes you feel alive.
There's something to it, of course. But where do I straddle that line? I think I have to look at each situation and take a step back and go, okay, what's the outcome of this? Like, what is the worst case scenario of me making a bad decision?
Yeah. In terms of the near-death experience, before you share the story, if you're willing, I want to ask you this. I had a near-death experience in Cirque du Soleil. I'm doing an aerial act, even though I'm attached to bungees. A carabiner can break. I can still fall 45 feet. I am tied off with a safety cable. It just so happened that manually there was human error. My cable was not attached. And so I fall from my trapeze. It's like, 45, 60 feet. And I've been doing the show now, like, 2,000 times. And I know at this point in the act, at this point in my drop, I should be feeling tension and resistance in my bungee cords, and I should be kind of heading back up now. But I'm not. I keep falling and I keep falling. And then this strange thing happens. I think it's probably due to adrenaline. Everything slowed down.
Yeah.
And as I'm looking down at the audience, they're getting closer and closer, and I can start seeing details. And I'm looking at this woman's handbag, and I'm thinking, like, wow, that's a really nice bag. Oh my God, look at that. Look at that guy's watch. The detail is insane. And then sound went away, and there was a level of total calm and total peace. And then my cable, I got pulled. There was a backup, and I obviously I didn't die. That was my near-death experience. There was a moment of complete serenity and peace and just trusting and letting go. What was that moment for you when you're facing death and it's looking at you and it's kind of whispering your name? We want you, Jeff.
Yeah. Yeah. There've been a few moments. I think probably the most recent one, I think we had kind of talked about this, was I was paddling and I had been sick, and I want to say I'd been traveling, so I hadn't paddled much, and I'd gotten back to town, and quite honestly, I really wasn't paying attention to the water flow, which is rule number one. Like, you got to know where the where the water flow is. And I remember putting the board in and thinking, man, it's really low. The water's really low because this rock that I normally stand on, I can't even see it. Like, it must be the big rock here. And what I didn't realize was the water was really, really high. And by the time I realized that, I had already portaged all the way to the end. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to ride this thing back. But I was not 100% by any stretch of imagination. And I hadn't paddled. I don't even think I had even whitewater paddled that year, maybe one day. Anyways, so I went down. There's a warm-up stretch that I do it's like a class 1. It's really very simple. And it was moving pretty fast. And I was like, oh man, I'm just really tired probably. I'm just not used to this paddling piece. But then you get to the end of that, and then there's a waterfall. It's called 100% because there's a 100% chance you're going to hit your head if you fall. So I don't run that rapid, for good reason. But that rapid flows into a channel that's kind of like a canyon a little bit in a way. It's part of a canyon. And so there's 3 other sections where you can put in there. And I put in at the middle section, which is where I normally would put in, but it was moving really, really fast. And I was like, man, this is moving way hotter than it is. And what I don't normally do, but on that day, just because I was, not 100%, I was wearing a leash. And a leash, like just like a surfboard leash, a leash connects to your board and then it connects to you. And usually people put a leash on their ankle, but in a whitewater situation, you would never want to do that because you couldn't reach your ankle to take it off. And it gets wrapped on things, so you don't want to do that. So I have one that it goes around my waist, and it's got a little Velcro. You just pull this tab, and it's got an emergency tab that pulls. And if the board for some reason gets stuck, it has an emergency breakaway. So I'm like,
so again, to a point you made earlier, you know the equipment, you understand the terrain, you know how this functions, you know the potential. Yeah. You're prepared.
Yeah, and I probably run this stretch of river 50 times, 45, 50 times. Maybe not at this level, but definitely I know where all the rocks and trees but the river's higher. It's higher than I've ever seen it. Or at least higher than I've ever run it. And I immediately put in and immediately fell off and kind of got sucked under. I got back on, but the paddle got pulled away. And so now I'm spinning, and I spin sideways and I fall off the board, and the river's moving so fast, it spins me like a whirlwind. And what it has done now is it's taken that leash and is now wrapped all the way around me. So now it's wrapped my arms, and now I'm pinned underneath the board into a tree that had fallen in the river. And the board is now laying on top of me, and the water is pressing the board down on me. So now I'm a sausage under the water, and I can't move. Even if I had and people are like, well, you should have had a knife, because you normally have a knife on so you can cut things off. But I couldn't reach my knife, even if I had a knife. And plus, what am I going to cut? I'm wrapped up like a sausage. I'd have to cut 8 of these cords to get out. I can't unleash it because it's wrapped around me. I can't take it off my ankle, or I can't take it off my board because that's still touched. So like you, everything slows down. Like, you remember every single second. I felt like it was an hour I was underwater. It was probably only 10 seconds. But that 10 seconds compounded with water, getting pressured, not sure if you're going to make it out. I think everything in the world slows down. Everything gets really narrow. And you start to think about the things that are really important to you. You're like, oh my God.
What were those things? So what did flash through your mind?
I would like to say that my family and all my kids and everything, but that's not what flashed through my mind. I think what flashed through my mind, what I remember the most was, I got to get out of here. Like, I'm not going to die this way. And I've had a couple near death experiences, and that's been the same reaction in each one of those was,
Yeah.
I got to get out of this. And I think instinct takes over more so than anything else.
So you're very driven, survival,
Yeah,
life.
like it was like at my core, like I'm not gonna die here, and I was like, I will find a way out of this thing, which I ended up doing. I just kind of like pushed myself. Eventually, suction pulled me, and I floated back to the top, and I was able to unravel myself. I still had a hell of a time getting the board out of the water.
But was there a moment? I know you just said that
Yeah.
you weren't going to die that way, but was there a brief moment? Because that was what I had for a brief moment of pure, complete. I know you believe in God. So
Yeah,
there's this moment of pure submission. Okay, take me. I'm. Did you have that moment, or it
I
was all
didn't
the
get. I
time?
wasn't underneath long enough. I did choke once on honey, which closed the windpipe, and I couldn't get it unstuck, and nobody could understand what I was saying because we weren't eating any food. It was like a honey packet that I
Yeah.
had eaten, and it just kind of like somehow got locked. When that went out, and I was blacking out, and like you losing all your visual cortex. And I remember we were in a car. We were going back to my house. We had been at the store. We were at what was the name of that store? Sprouts, right on
Oh,
Green
I love
Valley
Sprouts.
Horizon, and I live right there.
That's where I
Yeah, that's
shop.
probably where he shop. Yeah. So I literally was going home, which was like 2 blocks from there. And people were like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Because from the moment I turned into the neighborhood to a turnaround block, and I just remember my kids were playing outside in the cul-de-sac, and I was like, I just want to make it around the corner so I could see my kids before I die. I remember that. That was a tough one where I was like, oh my God. And luckily, just like the honey kind of like unsuction, and I was able to breathe. But I mean, I wasn't gonna maybe die, but that near death experience, if you will, I remember just wanting to see my family, or just wanting to
So
see
that one was the moment. Your
that one was
kids,
really
the
intense.
family
Yeah.
was the.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about parenthood because you're a hard worker. You've built two businesses. And by the way, before we end, I want to talk about this crazy decision you made to basically just end a business
Sure.
kind of not literally
Yeah.
overnight,
Yeah.
but kind of overnight, a highly successful business. I want to quickly talk about that. But first, it's a buzzword, it's a cliche term. Work-life balance. You've got family, but you're this highly ambitious, highly driven, highly focused entrepreneur. Have you had moments of imbalance?
Oh,
What has that looked like for you, and how do you get back into balance? How have you navigated that
yeah.
dual responsibility?
Definitely out of balance. I think to any entrepreneur, at least, with the work ethic that I had, it was a very dangerous cocktail because I could work all day, every day. And I did. And those first 5 years, I don't think I ever took a minute off. Maybe I think I burned out at year 7 and actually dabbled with another business because I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm really burned out. But I lucked out because my kids are really young, and quite honestly, they weren't going to remember. My wife was amazing. She was a stay-at-home mom. She totally supported the decision for me to work. I think by year 6, 7, she was kind of like, okay, when are we done here? And we definitely had a meltdown in 2018 where it was like, it's either the business or us. Like, what are you going to do here? And I think that kind of paid into what you're talking about, potentially the ending of the other team. But yeah, like I think it's hard. I mean, I think anything that because not only was it my work, but it was my passion. And I loved every minute of what I was doing. I mean, I was a director of fun, for goodness sakes. We were designing like custom team building events and give back
Yeah.
experiences. And we were traveling to some of the greatest destinations in the world, working for some of the best clients, and people that valued our work and that really enjoyed it. So it was easy to get caught up in the work. And, you surround yourself with great people like yourself. Like going to do work wasn't work. That was the most enjoyable piece
Yeah.
of it. And at
In
some
terms
point,
of
yeah.
in terms of business, before you share the story of kind of how you abruptly sort of say goodbye to this one business entity, even though it sort of still exists in a
Yeah.
different format. Over the years, I've seen you highly impacted. You're very sort of passionate about contributing to community. The company R&D events did a lot of poetic events where there was build a bike and these kids would get these bikes, and I could see the love and the purpose and the meaning behind this work. What drives you to do that type of work, giving to the community? Because business could often be seen as, I just want the money, give me the paycheck, I don't care. You're driven by something deeper, more meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, for me, R&D events was lifestyle more than anything. It wasn't about, I mean, we probably could have made a heck of a lot more money. I think we added up one day. I think we gave away, whether it was bonuses or whether it was just a charitable
I didn't get that. I don't remember that.
organization. We try to give a Christmas bonus every year. man, I want to say we gave away over 150,000, 200, maybe it was $100,000 each or something like that. Yeah, it was like 200 grand. Like
So
we
what
just,
makes you do that? But why?
because that was the most, that's what, that was the why. I mean, that was my business methodology was like, it wasn't about making money. It was about, can you make a sustainable lifestyle doing what you love? I think to me, that's more important than anything else. You know, it wasn't about making money or getting new clients or, add more people. It was just like, can we all sustain this great lifestyle together and enjoy it? I think towards the end there, like by 2018, it was like I was doing more work than anyone else, and everybody else was getting the lifestyle, and I was paying for it on both ends. That's kind of you give too much to anything, and that'll end up happening.
So to give us the quick version, you've got this highly successful business running well, even though you weren't doing it for money, you're making a shitload of money. And then next thing I hear stories like, oh yeah, they shut down. What do you mean? I just did a gig for them a week ago. No, what happened? What?
I mean, there were two factors in play. There were two really big factors. One was that we were getting a lot more high-end custom clients that wanted my full attention. And so it was hard for me to do both jobs. So we had like 3 clients that were taking up 80% of my time, but I was giving more time to the team to make sure that the other smaller programs were really operating. And I think what we needed was a succession plan for myself and JP, and the team we had, it just didn't seem like that was going to be within the cards. And I think so by the time we got to 2018, we were going to have to rebuild everything again or bring somebody in to run the company. And what we found is that like the company really was me and JP more than anything else. It was like clients kept asking for us. So, at some point it was just like, all right, we can't keep everybody, in the same realm. So we just kind of had to say, hey, it was a tough decision. I vividly remember reading a book to my kids that night. We read, I'm trying to see if I've got it here, but we read Shel Silverstein. I don't think it's not, I've got and he's got one of the poems in there, and it's like the time clock or the clock man. I think it's called the Clock Man. And it's talking about, like you're asking a kid, how much would you pay for another minute or something like that of your life? And he was like, oh, nothing. Cause I have as much time as the world does. And they come to midlife and they're like, oh, maybe a few dollars, but I don't want anything. But at the end of your life, he's like, I'll give away everything I have, like all the pearls and all the seas and all the stars and all the skies. I'd give everything just for another minute. And it was like, oh my gosh, I am blowing all my time. My time is my single most valuable resource. And the commodity that I covet the most was like, what can I do with my own time? And I never had that. Like I never had October off. I never had Christmas off. I never had any of these holidays. Like my time was always my work. And so I was like, well, how do I really get rid of everything and just really kind of focus, make time my priority? And that's really what flipped the switch in 2018 was that like, I'm the richest person in the world. Now I have all the time in the world to pick out what I want to do.
Now it makes total sense. Now it makes total sense. At the time, I just thought like this dude has lost the plot. What happened to our Jeff? Now I truly understand.
Yeah, I mean it was like you give yourself to everything, you give everything to something, and then at the end of the day, it was like, well, what was this for? And I wouldn't say that. We had a great experience, a great run, everything was amazing, but nothing lasts forever.
But since then, you started your own separate business, Ridgeline Experiences, which is doing similar stuff, but now this is you. I want to backtrack to the beginning of your journey into entrepreneurship. You started at a high level. You worked for the Ritz-Carlton. I've read the book Hort Schulze, and it's heavily about experiences. It's ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, and he's literally laid the foundation for the most impeccable work ethic and customer service. That's where your journey begins. What did you learn from them? And then how did it take you down the path of becoming a director of fun, doing team building, designing employee engagement, designing cultural strategies? Tell us about that arc.
Yeah, and I think, I really lucked out. I mean, I will say this, my next door neighbor, not my next door neighbor, but my neighbor was my mom's best friend, and her husband was this guy named Jim Vale, or still is her husband. And he was the vice president of Ritz-Carlton. And Ritz-Carlton was an Atlanta-based company. And when I was a kid, I wanted, like, people were like, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a police officer. I'm like, I want to be a hotel manager. They're like, what? And so I meet this guy, and he's the vice president. So I said, hey, at 14 years old, I think I was like, hey, would you be my mentor? And he was like, all right. We meet at the Waffle House. once, like once a year. It wasn't like we met weekly or anything like that, and he would just kind of help me through my path. And by the time I got to college, I majored in hospitality and tourism at Virginia Tech. And you had to do, in your junior year, you've got to do like one semester field study is what they call it. And most kids worked at Baskin Robbins, or they worked at the hotel on prop, like whatever, and they would still go to school. So I was like, I want a full immersion. So I call him up and he's like, yeah, we're offering an internship in Palm Beach where you work for 6 months and you work every hotel, like for 2 weeks, you work in each department, floral, you can make bouquet, whatever. I was like, all right, whatever. It sounds cool. I get there and it is a complete crash course and a complete shit show. If I'm being honest with you, the department I'm joining, there were 3 people. Now it was down to 1 girl and she just quit. So now it was me. So she was there for 2 days. I had pneumonia. I think when I first got there, it was like the only time I'd been sick. So I'm trying to learn on the job for 4 days, and then I'm cut free to do what, like, good luck. You're going to run this department. And I did it, and I did it really, really well. And I think that really kind of ingrained in me that like, oh, I can work at a high level. But the Ritz-Carlton, I mean, that was like a 3-day orientation to explain just the cultural values of what the company stands for. And it was everything in my wheelhouse, man. Yeah, it was like 3 steps of service. We had 20 basics. Again, it was like, it's kind of like being in the military in a way. They tell you how to get things done. But like in this world, you had autonomy to operate in your own space as long as you adhered to these standards. And as soon as I learned the basic standards, I was like, wow, this is great. And I absolutely love putting a name tag on and going in there and delivering amazing service.
Are you a believer? It sounds like, serendipity. Are you a believer? And I don't want to get too deep into sort of manifestation, this and that, but you kind of made you had a plan, you had a vision of where you wanted to go, but then things one of my favorite books is The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho. And one of the quotes is, once you decide what you want, the universe conspires to make, there it is. My version is different. Where's my version? I have a different, there's my version, different cover.
I love it. Yes, that's beautiful. Yes.
I've read it like 7 times.
Oh yeah. It's dog-eared. It's got notes in it. Yeah. Every time I read it, it's something completely different.
Because I
don't understand. Why was this possible?
Because we've become somebody different and we're paying attention. So
I love it.
You've kind of manifested, made these random things happen, or is it just a question of a situation is presented and you just focus on how do I make this work? Is it a combination of both?
Yeah, and I think you got to go out and attack what you want to get. I mean, yes, my neighbor happened to be the vice president of Ritz-Carlton, but it takes somebody to go and knock on the door and say, hey, can you teach me your ways? And I think so. I was, I manifested that piece of it. There was definitely a lot of luck. I mean, listen, look at me. I'm like a 6'3" white guy, who grew up in a 2-parent household. I didn't pay for college.
Wow, it must have been
I was
tough.
an athlete. I can talk in front of people. Like I've got this skill set that is very unique, and if I wasn't successful, I would have been a complete throwaway. Like you,
Jeff, I'm a 5'7" black dude who grew up on the streets of London. Wow.
We couldn't be any more different. So it really is that mindset. You've got to go after and get what if this is what you want to do, you got to go for it. And you can't, again, you can't take no for an answer. I don't think following your passion or, being happy is the ultimate be all in life. I think you've got to have challenge. You got to have grit. You got to go through, some shit, gotta almost die a few times before you realize where the value of life is.
Yeah. But you have this knack of just making situations happen. And I want to highlight one that basically guided you down the path of becoming an MC. You were thrown into a situation that you just embraced. And can you tell us that story where you became the announcer?
Yes.
The unannounced announcer.
Now, listen, I was the director of fun, my whole life. So I was always in trouble in school. No, not trouble, but I was always like loudmouth person.
But there was a situation where a college or something, you were asked, hey, the MC.
Yeah. I mean, I saw it wasn't like this came out of nowhere. That I was already kind of like a loudmouth kind of guy. And we would go to these basketball games. And I was considered a super fan. We would sit on the front row and we would heckle the other teams and I would make comments and jokes. That was within reason. It was nothing aggressive. But so we got to go to all the basketball games. We'd sit in the front row. So we kind of know everybody. I knew the coaches. And one day the announcer, who wasn't part of the school, he was like somebody's dad that would come in. He got laryngitis. And so he couldn't do the announcing and the warm up. And he had come up with this spiel where it was like Chattahoochee, and he would hang on to this point. So he had already laid the foundation for what this was. And so the coach came to me. He's like, "Hey, listen, we need somebody to do the lineups. Would you be willing to do this?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Of course I would be willing to do this.
I was born
making announcements in front of all these people, make a fool of myself. You bet, absolutely. I do it every day anyway. So why not give me the microphone?" But yeah, they gave it to me, and I just remember I'd never heard my voice on a microphone, especially in an arena. I went to a big church and I was part of the youth group. So I'd make announcements and that. So I had some stage training, but dude, I'm gonna tell you something. When you hear your own voice on a microphone, that is a pretty scary thing for the first time, but I loved it. And I leaned hard into it. And I think that moment planted a seed because I saw what I did have a reaction on the audience and the crowd. And as soon as you get that and you feel that, I would assume it's the same for a stand-up comedian or somebody that's in theater or like Cirque du Soleil. When the audience responds to what you did, and
it's amazing.
It is like that is the ultimate power in like I have the power. You're like
it can be addictive. Yeah. It is. Yeah. It can be addictive. In closing, two sort of final thoughts. First one is either on a business level, on a personal level. I don't like the cliche idea of what's your 5-year plan, what's your 10-year plan. Where are you heading and what is kind of coming up next? Because highly intelligent, highly creative people, we change a lot. We have new adventures, we have new ideas, we have new passions. Where are you heading? What are you excited about?
I've got a great client right now called Changemaker that I'm working with. They're phenomenal. They represented all of the National Geographic explorers, adventurers, photographers when they would go do speaking engagements. So they would rent out theaters and they would do they would hire these individuals as speakers, and they would do speaker training and work with those individuals. I somehow found them because I was looking for a speaker for an event.
I know a guy. I know a guy.
And I think we had talked about this one. Was that one client, and so the keynote they ended up going with was from Changemaker, and I had sent this lady or the owner of Changemaker a video that I had made. And she absolutely loved it. And so she started hiring me to do videos for them. And I was like, okay, that's cool. But what I really want to be is a speaker. Like, I want to be a keynote speaker. I want to talk about culture. I want to talk about the experiences that I've got. Like how to change the team's dynamic or how to get teams to work better together or why is culture important? Because culture is having a moment and then it doesn't have a moment. And then now AI is having a moment and culture is no longer being talked about. And it's like, culture is very important no matter what's going on. And the culture is how your team acts and behaves and works with each other. And you can either make that a great experience or a horrible experience. And whether that's quote unquote team building, the activity itself, or it's the day-to-day interaction of your team members with each other, how they treat each other. Yeah. And so
it's who you hire, it's how you onboard them. So many.
So it's so multi-layered, so multifaceted. I want to really kind of build an expertise in that world.
Yeah.
And do something like this where I'm talking to people, getting their information, and then being able to share that with an audience. That's kind of the direction I want to go. Right now I'm making films. I still love producing custom events. I love give back experiences, anything to give back to local communities. And I'm always looking for new clients.
And I love that part about you. That was one of the, by the way, I should have reached out to you when I first started working with you guys. I should have been like, hey, will you be my mentor? Because you're a highly inspirational guy. So my last question really, and it's not so much, it's more of a thought. We go along this journey of life. We fall, we stumble, we learn, we grow. You said you've had the quintessential Disney childhood. You were the tall 6'3" white guy with a perfect family. It's not so much, are there any regrets? But now that you've come this far, that little 7-year-old version of you, what would you have told them to help you either get to where you wanted to be quicker or take a different path? Is there any advice that you would give that 7-year-old kid?
No, it was funny. My wife and I were talking about this yesterday, and I think my answer would be highly inappropriate to say here, but but it didn't, like, I wouldn't change anything about my life. Like, I feel very blessed, very fortunate. I've loved all the challenges that I've gotten presented to me. I wish that some way along the way I wasn't as rigid as I was. And I think I got shaped a lot by my religion when I was earlier on, really kind of helped and that for good. It did it for the good, but it also stunted my growth in other areas. And from my relationship standpoint, I feel like I've caught up on a lot of that I would have missed earlier on. But you know, I think my advice was like, like sex isn't going to change everything. You know, like I think that was because it was such a big thing.
That is so inappropriate.
Yeah. I have to cut this out of the podcast, but you know, like I think that would be the advice I was like, I would give, maybe not to my 7-year-old self, maybe definitely to my 13-year-old self. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
it's gonna be okay, man. You're gonna make it through you'll make it through there. But it was, yeah, that'd be the one. That'd probably be the only advice.
Jeff, you are a very inspirational human being. You're a very giving guy. Your leadership skills. I mean, there's so many great things I could say about you, but the most beautiful thing for me is I value and appreciate the friendship you've extended me. I've enjoyed this conversation. I know we're going to have more conversations in the future. Next time you're in Vegas, we'll go climb some mountains. No near-death experiences, but I look forward to hanging out with you again.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it, man. It's always good to
Thank you,
see you.
Jeff.
Yeah.